Okay, so food, water, and shelter are the three most important aspects of survival, and not necessarily in that order. Now, we've all heard the rule of threes, right? You can go 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. At a very simple level, these are all good rules to go by, and but we can go quite a bit deeper than that. So let's do that. Let's dig a little deeper into all three of these. And let's start off with some of the water basics. Most of us take for granted that we have access to all of this water, whatever we want, because all we have to do is turn on the faucet and then water comes spilling out, and it seems like it's just a never-ending supply. And it's impossible to run out of water. Well, that might be true, but it's not really that cut and dry. On a global scale, there's just as much water on the earth as there ever has been. So the short answer is no, we're not going to run out of water in the literal sense. There's about 3 billion cubic feet of water that fall on the surface of the planet every year. And to put that in perspective, that would cover all of the land masses on this planet with about 3 inches of water. Now, this might seem a lot, but consider that the above sea level surface area of Earth is about 57.5 million square miles. So take that 3 billion cubic feet of water and cut that in half because of evaporation and water taken up by trees and grass and other plant life, stuff like that. So about 50 million cubic feet of the remaining 1.5 billion cubic feet of water flows out to the oceans and makes it undrinkable. So that leaves us with 1 billion cubic feet of drinkable water that falls on the surface every year. And I know this is a lot of numbers, but it all makes sense. Around 10% of that water is used to grow crops and personal use and industrial use, like to generate electricity and stuff like that. The good news is that all water eventually evaporates and then gets recycled into fresh, clean water. So why is all of this so bad? That seems like a lot of water, right? Water isn't evenly distributed throughout the planet, so geographic location and topography dictate where that water is most likely to evaporate and where it's going to fall. Another factor is population. Not all regions require the same amount of water. There's, in bigger cities they require more, and in rural areas it's not so much. So even though the earth is 70% water, people still don't have enough clean water to drink. And of the 300 million trillion gallons of water on earth, that's a lot of water, right? Only 3% of that is fresh water. And of that 3%, a little over 2% is taken up by icebergs and glaciers, and basically it's frozen. So this means that with all the rivers, streams, lakes, aquifers, and groundwater expected to sustain the 7 billion people that are on Earth right now, this makes up less than 1% of the total water on the planet. These days, water scarcity is kind of a result of droughts, short-term or long-term, human activity. And this is crazy. The average person uses 100 gallons of water a day. And that just makes the problem much worse, much quicker, especially how our population is growing. It's really difficult to estimate the exact amount of water needed for an individual. We all hear the 1 gallon of water per day is what we need to survive. But even with that, I'm pretty sure that 100 gallons a day might be overdoing it a little bit. There's no question that adequate hydration is important, and water is a critical nutrient to our survival. But our individual needs are going to vary based on our age, our gender, our weight, our health, and the kind of physical activities we do, along with the numerous environmental factors like temperature and humidity and all of that stuff. But this kind of 100 gallons of water a day thing is kind of an example of how complacent and how ignorant we are to this problem, this water shortage problem. Access to clean water is fundamental to survival and critical for reducing the prevalence of many water-related diseases. Civilizations have been built and have crumbled because of water supply. A small community can be turned into a thriving city or metropolis because they were able to figure out how to get running water into the city, and vice versa. Once that water's gone, that city, it could crumble. The sanitation and all of that becomes an issue. And unfortunately, I don't see a solution to this problem other than more government regulation and privatization of water. And I think we all know how that's going to work out. Like I said, people don't worry about a problem until it's staring them in the face. And as long as the water is freely flowing out of our faucets and we can get it anytime we want at a cost that's almost nothing, nobody is going to be concerned about this problem or how much they use until it's, like I said, until it's staring them in the face. I'm not even sure that most people know that they can only survive for 3 to 5 days without water. And this is why storing water and knowing how to collect water and knowing how to filter water is so important. If water becomes undrinkable, we need to know not only how to get that water, but we need to know how to make that water drinkable. Now, not everyone is going to have the option to put 1,000-gallon water tank in their backyard, and even if you do have that option, you'll need to protect it somehow. It's not like you can hide a 1,000-gallon water tank under your bed or anything like that. And once that water is gone, you're still going to need to know how to get some more. And if everybody else doesn't have water, and they say, "Hey, you see Joe down the street's got a 1,000-gallon container in his backyard. Let's go get us some water." Now, I'm not going to go into all the different ways to purify water or make a water catchment, but I am going to go through some of the basics. And, there's so many valuable resources available out there that we can all learn from. All we have to do is just do a little bit of research on what the options are and what your options are given your individual circumstances. So let's get into filtering water, the difference between filtering and purification. A lot of people don't understand the differences, so I want to go through a little bit of that. Filtering water is far different than from purifying water. When you filter water, it takes out the particulates and the impurities in the water, the big stuff basically, but not necessarily the biological contaminants like viruses and other chemicals that could be in that water. Drinking water that hasn't been properly disinfected can contain harmful bacteria, parasites, and pathogens like Giardia and Cryptosporidium and Legionella, stuff like that. Water purification tablets are good because they're inexpensive, and you can basically find those anywhere and can be carried in your pocket or your bug-out bag or anything like that. Other methods include boiling water, or using bleach with like a 10-to-1 ratio, and that's 10 parts water, 1 part bleach. But boiling water is kind of the preferred method for purification. But you need to take into account that you might not have the resources if you're on the go to boil water or large amounts of it. Water purification aside, you should always have some kind of means to start a fire, regardless of what outdoor adventure you have planned. And the reason why boiling water is a preferred method is because the steam that comes off of the water is completely purified water. And if you can find a way to catch that steam, that's perfectly purified water. That's a little tough to do, but anyway, the boiling water itself, the water that's still in the pan, it's boiling it for 3 minutes is going to kill all of that stuff in there. It's not going to get rid of the dirt chunks or if there's bug parts or anything like that, but it'll get rid of all those viruses and stuff. Now, like I said, when boiling water, you need to bring it to a rapid boil for at least 1 minute if you're at sea level, and up to 3 minutes if you're like 500 feet or more above sea level, because water boils at a different temperature at higher elevations. And water needs to reach and maintain its temperature for a certain period of time so that all the waterborne contaminants are destroyed. And the length of the time that the water needs to boil depends on the temperature and the altitude and all of that stuff. Now, some of you may wonder, why not just boil water for 3 minutes regardless, or even longer no matter what your elevation is? And this is because boiling will cause you to lose water because of the evaporation and all of that. And the steam rising is basically precious drinking water, and if you don't have a whole lot, you might need that little bit of water that you're losing. And if you're in a survival situation or anything like that where you have a limited amount, you're going to need every little bit that you have. And like I said, boiling water will remove the harmful bacteria, but it won't remove the particulates. And although most particulates aren't going to harm you after they've been boiled, they probably don't taste very good. And I don't know about the idea of having a cricket leg floating in your water or anything like that. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can filter water, from building your own filter in a survival situation to a store-bought filter like the Live Straw. But whenever possible, filter your water before boiling it or before you chemically treat it, because filtering water will remove debris, insects, sediment, and waterborne cysts that contain bacteria and parasites. A way you can do this is to use coffee filters, bandanas, pieces of clothing, sand, gravel, charcoal, any of that stuff that you could find in a wilderness situation or even in a SHTF situation in an urban area. In some instances, not removing debris from the water can render purification tablets ineffective, and the boiling process may not destroy certain waterborne cysts. The cysts can kind of act like a shield, and they can withstand high temperatures and chemicals for prolonged periods of time, and therefore protecting the bacteria that are kind of harboring inside those cysts. Now, making a water filter can be done in a lot of different ways. I'm going to go through one, and this one is where you can use a 2-liter water bottle. What you do is you cut off the bottom, and then you put a piece of cloth or a coffee filter at the end, and that's the end, the small end, the cap end. And then using some charcoal or coals from a campfire above that cloth or coffee filter. And then after that, you'll need to find some sand or some really fine gravel. And then to finish it off, you want to find some coarser gravel or a little bit larger gravel. Now, this is kind of the basics for building a field expedient water filter. What it is you get something on the bottom like a cloth or a paper towel or a coffee filter that will hold that water in once it goes through the charcoal. The second level is the charcoal or the coals from a campfire. And then the third level, you'll have some really fine material, the finest, smallest sand that you can find. And then you'll top it off with the big stuff at the very top that'll grab some of that stuff. So as it goes through, it's going to get filtered more and more. But like I said, there's many different ways to make a filter. You can use any container that has not been used to store chemicals or toxins as a filtering device, like milk jugs or 2-liter bottles work really well too. But you got to think in mind if you're bugging out or you're in a situation, I don't know that you're going to have a milk jug on you. But you'll be able to find lots of different stuff laying around as long as you keep your eyes open and all of that. And like I said, remember whenever possible, try to boil your water after you filter it, because the filter isn't going to get rid of some of those little microorganisms and all of that. So by boiling it, you're going to get rid of those as well. Now let's go into some ways of finding water and storing water. There's a lot of ways to find water when there is no quote-unquote water source like a lake or a river near you. You'll have to use your imagination and think outside the box to find it sometimes. But unless you're in the middle of the desert, you can probably find some sort of water source somewhere nearby. This could be a water tank if you're in an urban area, a water tank, or even the tank of a toilet, something like that. You kind of have to do what you have to do at that point. The concern that you should have, though, is will I be able to find enough water to survive? And once I do find that water, can I make it drinkable? In an urban situation, you'll be able to find water from, like I said, water heaters, garden hoses, and even toilets. If it were to rain, you could figure out a way to collect that rain with a tarp funnel or even dig a hole with something to keep the water from seeping into the soil. Use a tarp or something like that. Building what is called a solar still or drink the water that is collected on leaves and stuff like that. I mean, if you're trying to find water and you're dying of thirst, you're going to think of every little thing you can. So like I said, we need to kind of think outside the box with this. And all of these are great skills to have, even if you plan on bugging in during a disaster or a grid down event, if you don't plan on bugging out. But it would be a lot easier if you already had some of this water stored. Storing water takes up a lot of space and a lot of room. And considering that the average person needs about a gallon a day to survive, you're going to need a lot of water, and you're going to have to find a place to put all of that water. Now, if you're storing regular tap water, that water has already been treated, so you don't need to add any additional chemicals to it when it's just going to be sitting there in a container anyway. But if your water needs treatment, treat it when you're going to drink it. Don't do it when you store it, because as you store it, once you drink that water, maybe it might need that treatment when you go to drink it rather than when you first store it. And another thing to think about when you're storing water is the containers that you're storing it in. You want to make sure they're PVC PBA free and prohibit ultraviolet light, and which kind of helps decrease the algae growth and maintain its freshness. Now, PBA stands for bisphenol A. PBA is an industrial chemical that was used to make certain plastics and resins in containers since like the 1960s, I think. Always clean your containers with a 10-to-1 ratio of water to bleach, not the other way around. That'll kill you, for about 30 seconds, and then rinse them well before you store your water. Now, you have a few different choices when storing your water, and believe it or not, you do want to rotate it. The water doesn't necessarily go bad, but it should be used within a 6-month time frame. And you can either rotate your water to make sure it's used in that 6-month time frame, or add water preserver, which will help it last to up to 5 years or even longer. Even if your water is older than 6 months, you can still have a quality filter and make it drinkable, and it's not likely that water really ever goes bad. You just need to oxygenate it after a while, and maybe when you open it up, shake it up a little bit and get that oxygen back in there. And it otherwise it just might not taste very good, but it's not going to kill you. Now, having water, finding water, and purifying water should always be on your mind. You can survive 10 times longer without food than you can without water. And by educating yourself about how to build a water filter or how to find water and filter it once you find it, gives you a little bit more of an advantage in a survival situation or an off-the-grid event or anything like that. And the more you prepare, the more these little advantages kind of add up over time. So that's the basics on filtering water. Like I said, you can kind of dig in a little deeper with all of this, with filtering and purifying and all of that. But just make sure you know, because water is one thing that you absolutely have to have, and it's one thing that you can't see the little things in there that are going to kill you. So you got to make sure those are all gone. Okay, so now let's get into food storage a little bit. And food storage is one of the most important aspects of preparing, and this is probably why we get labeled as hoarders and extremists. But think about it. What's more likely to cause mass chaos and disorder? Not having money or not having food? If the dollar collapses and the people still have to have a way to eat and drink, they're far less likely to, quote unquote, flip out because they haven't become desperate at that point. If they have $1,000 but they can't buy a loaf of bread with that $1,000, that's when they're going to become desperate, and they're going to be, at that point, they're going to be willing to do whatever it takes to survive. And personally, I don't want to be one of these people that haven't eaten in 3 days and that are fighting the masses for the last can of green beans at Walmart if our food supply line gets cut off or anything like that. And this is exactly why I choose to store food and even grow my own food. Now, do I grow enough food to support me and my family? Well, no. But I am learning these skills, and that's what it's all about, right? Planning for the future. Maybe at some point I'll be able to figure out the area and the needs of my family and figure out exactly how much I need to grow. Right now, I'm just learning the processes, basically. And this is why it's important to, at the very least, have enough food stored to last you and your family about 2 weeks, if not even longer. A grid down event could last anywhere from 3 days to 3 months or even longer. You just never know. And it's a very real possibility that our economy could get so bad that we need to have our own food source because the only grocery store is going to be in our cupboards or in our backyard. So where to start with all this? When you first start, you begin formulating a food storage plan, and keep in mind that you don't need 50 pounds of flour in your closet or a closet full of wheat or anything like that. If you don't have the staples of your diet that you and your family eat on a daily basis, and if you don't know how to make bread and biscuits from scratch, all of that wheat and flour are going to kind of be worthless anyway. Because unlike freeze-dried foods, you can't just add water to flour, and if you do, it's not going to taste all that great anyway. Now, a phrase that was coined a long time ago by Dr. Prepper, I believe, is store what you eat and eat what you store. And this is because if your family isn't used to eating rice every day, you're probably going to have a hard time getting them to eat it when the SHTF or when the poop hits the fan. Canned goods are food with a long shelf life and are available just about everywhere. And it's a good starting point to where you want to start building your food storage plan. Boxed meal spaghetti and freeze-dried foods are also a good option because of their longer shelf life and because they're less likely to go bad before you actually use them. And like I said, you have quite a few options when it comes to buying food with a long shelf life. You can get it from your local grocery store or from one of the long-term food storage suppliers like Mountain Man or Wise Foods, or even learning how to grow your own food. But whatever path you use, just remember the saying, store what you eat and eat what you store. Now, another aspect of food storage that is sometimes overlooked is nutrition and calories. And sometimes we don't give it a second thought because there's so much variety available to us these days that we're bound to get the vitamins and minerals that we need to survive. But what happens when we need to depend on our food storage and we only have, ramen noodles or rice or something like that? Without the right amount of vitamins and minerals, our bodies would begin to kind of break down, causing us to become sick, and then, that would just make a bad situation even worse. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to become nutritionists and break down each and every meal that we eat based on our body's needs. We just need to make sure that we have enough of these nutrients in our body for our bodies to function correctly. What our bodies do is they basically filter out what they need, and the rest becomes waste. So just keep in mind that you want to try to maintain the same diet that your body's used to right now, so that way when the poop does hit the fan, your body doesn't have to go through that adjustment period, or you don't get sick of eating rice every day for a month straight. So let's look at kind of the big picture. When you first start out your food storage plan, focus on your immediate future, but always keep the bigger picture in mind. And you would be surprised at how much you can accumulate in a short period of time just by buying a few extra cans of something every time you go to the store. After a while, you'll realize that you have a few weeks' supplies built up. And by taking it slow and using an incremental approach, that way you're not going to get overwhelmed and bogged down and then disorganized and all of that stuff. If you start small and work your way up, it'll give you time to create a food management system that works for you. Having a good food supply is one thing, but making sure it's rotated and not expired when you need it is a situation you don't want to be in if the poop were to hit the fan. You need to store your extra food and figure out how to handle the rotation and all of that, so you don't find a can of food sitting on the back of the closet that's was expired 4 years ago, and you're kind of SOL at that point. So just look at the bigger picture when it comes to food storage. Start out small, figure out what you have right now, take a personal audit of your situation, figure out what you have, and then just slowly build on that food storage. And then eventually, before you know it, you'll have enough food stored to last a couple weeks, and then you can just keep going at that point. And as long as from the beginning you're staying organized as much as possible and rotating everything, you'll build a good base of it, a good system to build on. That way, when you do have 6-8 months worth of food stored, it's just not all thrown in the closet, or like my wife, you find a can of beans stuck behind the pots and pans or anything like that. So that's basically it on the food and water. Just remember, there's different types of water. Filtering and water purification are two different things, and they do two different jobs. So make sure you understand that about water purification and water filtering. And then on your food storage, don't get overwhelmed. Just start small, figure out what you need, and then as you get into this further, you'll realize that you're not doing quite as bad as you thought you were, and you can start working towards a bigger and better future for yourself.